Good morning. My name is Penny Gotro. I'm one of the board members here at Harbor Include. Thank you so much for doing this video training and for your interest in being a volunteer with Harbor Include. We're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so if this was an in-person training, we would ask for introductions. We'd ask for your name and pronoun. So I'd like you to get used to that idea. We ask for pronouns for everybody, every single drop-in. The reason we do that is we want to normalize asking for pronouns. We want people to feel like they can change their names, change their pronouns as needed, and that it is okay to be exploring, especially for our population. Exploring is a really big deal and a really important part of that development. Okay. Normally we would ask for rules for the room, things like, does anyone have a nut allergy? Does anyone require a softer volume? Things like that. I want to introduce that idea because I want, again, for you to get used to that. If you've ever worked in a school, or maybe if you remember being in school, some of those same ideas of how can we make the space safe and comfortable. Okay? Question cards and breaks aren't going to really apply over video. Okay, so who do we serve? We serve LGBTQ, meaning lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer questioning, youth and their friends aged 13 to 18. And their friends means that we aren't asking anyone if they're queer. We're not asking anybody what their gender is. They can volunteer that if they'd like, but anyone in that age group is welcome as long as they are, not displaying hate speech, etc. Okay. And the term ally just means someone who's not a member of the LGBTQ community, but who supports that community and wants to be part of that community and wants to be active with that community. All right. All right, we do drop-in nights on Fridays. Now, at this time, we are kind of looking for our regular schedule again. So this will be any given Friday that we're open, this will apply. And we'll be in touch with you about Fridays that you're going to be volunteering. Okay, we ask volunteers to arrive at events on Emerson and Hoquiam at 5:45 p.m. Okay, we're going to do activities. Sometimes it requires some setup, often art projects. So putting out the paints, putting out the canvases, whatever it might be, getting the snack table set up. And in recent times, we've also been offering a meal, so maybe helping cook that meal. At 6 p.m., the doors will be open. We're going to be greeting our youth, collecting anonymous demographics for funding purposes, completing youth paperwork with any new youth. And the paperwork, it's just a couple of pages. It has things like any allergies you have, emergency contacts, preferred name and pronoun, and does ask those demographics for funding. Check-in is when we're going to ask everyone their name and pronoun, like I mentioned earlier. We often do a fun question or a fact, something to kind of ice break. And volunteers can talk about services they provide. We are phasing that out to a degree because we want volunteers to be there for that night to have fun with the youth and create that safe space, and less about how they can provide support outside of the program. Okay, main activity will be set up typically in the larger of the two rooms. It's usually an art project, anything from coloring to cooking. Then in the smaller room, there's usually more sort of free play, if you will. So there might be a D&D game going, there might be cards being played, or just hanging out. We also usually have a movie, television, or music up on the screen. Sometimes we do karaoke as the main event, which combines all of those things. At 8:45, we're going to start winding down. We're going to start asking the youth to shuffle out. Sometimes it takes some time, so by starting at 8:45, we're trying to get out on time. We're also going to be doing cleanup at this point, so we'll be taking down the snack table, sort of undoing everything we did at the beginning. And at 9 o'clock, we are closed. In recent times, we've often used the Baby Shark theme as a sort of, this is the end of the night cue. Okay. I kind of went over the crafts a little bit. We also do skill building with the youth, so this might be cooking, like I mentioned, or anything that you have an interest and some expertise in that you'd like to pass on as a possibility can be a great thing to do for the evening. And you would bring materials or ask us to purchase materials, which we can do in most cases, and set up in the main room and kind of lead that for whoever is interested during that time. We would just ask that you schedule that so we know that you're going to be doing that and when you're going to be doing that, and also so that we can have maybe an extra floating volunteer since your focus will be taken up. Okay. Dances. We do several dances. We do the Queer Pride Prom in the summertime, or this year it'll actually be early fall. We have often done a winter dance, and sometimes we do dances as a main event. They tend to be fairly popular. Events on Emerson is very well set up to do dances, so it can be a very, very fun and actually fairly easy way to do Harbor Include. Also, we sometimes do dances as fundraisers, such as the Pride Prom is a fundraiser for Harbor Include. When we do fundraiser dances, often we'll have a for sale snack space, and we do ask that volunteers potentially run that snack bar. Okay. Tabling is for when we go out into the community to tell people who we are, to find volunteers, or to participate in important programs like the Suicide Prevention Walk that happens most years near the Log Pavilion. This is a way for us to be part of the community, to get our message out there, and we typically need between 3 and 5 volunteers, depending on how long the event is, to sort of take 4-hour shifts roughly. And there's usually 2 shifts for most tabling. Lastly, community training. If you have experience training or you have an interest in training, we are open to going to places to do training events. We talk about Harbor Include. We talk about sort of LGBT 101, which is another video you may have taken already. We try to provide a window into our community and to what we do to help increase the sort of general standing and general acceptance of the community. Okay, and if you're interested in that, definitely let us know. That is an on again, off again. We have done a training down at the Youth Corrections Facility in Pacific County. We've done trainings for the Elks. So it really just depends, and we would love to have you involved in that. Finally, our mentorship program. This program is kind of evolving right now, but we do have some youth who age out, they turn 19, who've been part of the program for some time and they would like to help out. They can't volunteer formally until they're 21, so the mentorship program is a means for them to be involved and to sort of start taking on those responsibilities in a sort of slow way. And acting as a mentor for a mentee is a way to have a little bit more of a direct relationship with one of the youth who you've gotten to know, and sort of help them into those first stages of adulthood and leadership. Okay, so if you did the LGBT 101, we went over these stats, so I think I'm going to go ahead and forego going through them a second time. Just please be sure to go ahead and check that video out. The local need, it has proven to be pretty meaningful. Since we came into existence, we have helped a little over 30 kids, approximately 13 of them over a fairly long period of time. We have seen need expressed throughout the pandemic that happened in 2020. And when we weren't able to operate, and need expressed by other organizations who are not able to provide this service. One of the big things that makes us unique, other than the fact that we serve youth, is that we're a dry LGBTQ space, meaning that we do not do alcohol, even in events where we could. So for our fundraisers, we don't serve alcohol. For any space where we might be involved where there would be adults, that's a choice we've made, and that is because historically LGBTQ spaces have often had a pretty intense relationship with alcohol, and there is a roughly 400% versus non-LGBTQ communities alcohol substance use disorder rate in our community. So we are working to model that for our youth and to try to undo that as much as we can in our local area. Okay, so basic rules. The minimum age for volunteering at Harbor Include is 21. Youth who age out and have established a relationship with Harbor Include may be granted the mentor role, combining elements of volunteering and participating as a youth from 18 to 21 on a case-by-case basis. All volunteers must pass an annual background check. We do this with the Washington State Patrol, and we pay for that. Although if you'd like to donate the $10, we certainly won't turn it down. Volunteers must commit to be present for at least one drop-in per month and attend one volunteer meeting per quarter. So what that looks like is we're going to have an electronic sign-up sheet. You will pick the Friday per month that you want to come. We do ask that folks not volunteer for more than 2 Fridays a month unless there's a specific need. Because we are trying to avoid burnout and trying to respect everyone's time. And we have found over time that people who, that by holding it to 2 volunteer periods per month, people tend to stay with the program longer and tend to appreciate their time with the kids more. Okay. If a volunteer cannot make it to a scheduled drop-in, it's their responsibility both to let a board member know and to work with the board and other volunteers to find a replacement. This should be easier with our upcoming electronic system. Please remember that the drop-in cannot be open with fewer than 3 volunteers present, so timely notice of cancellation is critical. Under no circumstances is a volunteer to be alone with the youth. This is important. That means that there has to be 2 volunteers in both rooms. If there is only 3 volunteers, that means we are going to be closing the smaller room and only be in the larger room, which is fine. We have to have at least 3 so that someone can go to the bathroom. Events on Emerson and Harbor include our substance-free campuses. If you are a smoker, please leave the property to smoke and please keep your butts tidy. A volunteer coming to drop in intoxicated is grounds for immediate removal from the program. Fairly self-explanatory. Okay. Harbor includes strives for excellence in respecting all forms of diversity. Volunteers will not use offensive language or act in a discriminatory manner or belittling way for any reason, including but not limited to race, religion, gender identity, sexual identity, age, physical and or mental ability, class background, or culture, country of origin. Board and volunteers will work together to coach each other and youth if these situations arise. Commentary or conversation concerning dieting, weight, or other health concerns can be challenging for other volunteers and youth. Harbor Include is a body-positive space. Please keep that in mind when talking to youth. If a youth brings up the topic, try to be positive and supportive and encourage youth to speak to a volunteer with medical or counseling experience or to bring it up with their primary care provider. We would really prefer that they bring it up with their primary care provider at this time. There are some volunteers who are able to answer some of those questions, and we will if need be. But again, going forward, our focus is to be this night, this space, versus trying to provide services outside of the drop-ins. It's incredibly important to keep our youth's identities and participation in Harbor Include confidential. Many youth are not outside of Harbor Include, are experiencing discrimination from their family, may not want to be out anywhere but Harbor Include, and so forth. Do not tag youth in public social media posts regarding Harbor Include. This is a great opportunity for private messages to the youth in question. Volunteers may only transport youth with written explicit permission from the youth's parents, allowing the volunteer in question to transport youth. Harbor Include will not be held liable for any injury to youth if they are transported by volunteers. The board will notify staff if this policy changes. Staff may not engage in a romantic or sexual relationship with youth or with transitional age mentors. Violation of this rule is grounds for immediate removal from the program. Mentors may not engage in new romantic or sexual relationships with youth once they are mentors. Mentors with pre-existing romantic relationships with youth will be handled on a case-by-case basis. Harbor Include practices active, consistent, affirmative consent. This means everybody must ask before touch, including high fives, hugs, handshakes, fist bumps, etc. Horseplay, roughhousing, wrestling, etc. are not allowed at Harbor Include. We're working with teenagers. This one is something you will have to watch out for. Please keep an eye on the youth, be participating with the youth, try not to clump together when you're at the program, because horseplay unfortunately does happen, and even well-intentioned but unwanted touch has been an issue. So please keep this one in mind. Keep an eye on the flow of youth between rooms. Make sure that at least 2 volunteers are in both rooms so that as youth move back and forth, we are not following them around. It works pretty well if you stay vaguely near the doors and sort of pop in and out to little groups, to groups of youth. But yeah, you don't want to be seen as sort of like, I don't know, stalking the youth. 2 volunteers near the front doors at all times. So if you are on door duty, be willing to stand in front of parents or community members who are not trained volunteers. This is a big deal. Adults who are not trained volunteers are not allowed on the premises during harbor include. We have had an incident where a parent barged their way in, and you do need to be willing to sort of put yourself in the way. We aren't asking you to like wrestle with them or anything, but we want you to be comfortable being a barrier if you're working door duty. Remember, we are here for the youth. Have conversations and interact. Ask youth about their hobbies, classes, and interests, and keep talking to youth. If a youth describes a situation you believe to be abusive, start by listening and affirming the trust involved and then telling you. Let the youth know if you are a mandated reporter and remind them that you have to tell a mandated reporter on staff even if you are not. It is important that the youth know the procedures for reporting and how that may affect them. The most important thing to know is that these conversations happen, and listening and caring is what the youth need in that moment. Self-explanatory. So myself, Aaron Gotro, or Eric Morgan, Sarah Owen, and Rainbow Rose are all members of our board or volunteers who are crisis trained. All of us are mandated reporters. These are some national lines that can be helpful to direct youth to if they're facing discrimination or abuse. The Trans Lifeline, the Trevor Project, which is a suicide hotline for LGBT youth, Beyond Survival, which is a sexual assault response center, and the text crisis line, text home to 741-741. Okay. So, languages and terms, we're going to go through this somewhat briefly. It is important to know that terms change, that this could be outdated by the time you actually volunteer, and the important thing is to listen and to ask. Don't take this as gospel or something where you now know exactly what's going to be correct in every situation, but it is a good guide. Language and description shape policy and behavior. It is important to have discussions about it, and the youth are going to bring it up. That's certainly true. Please feel empowered to ask questions of the youth and to us, but mostly us if possible. Be respectful when challenging language. Don't indulge in gotcha or call out culture. There is a place for that, and this is not it. This is simply, we aren't looking to prove people wrong or to cause people to feel worse about themselves. We just want to keep the language respectful and safe. It isn't about being right. Okay. Let's see. There we go. All right. This is the LGBTQ inclusive language do's and don'ts. These are just some examples of older language, things to say now, and the whys. I'm happy to provide you with a copy of this. I'm going to kind of slide through it here. I'm not going to read it through. I'm just going to leave it up on the screen here for a minute. I would say the ones that are kind of the most ingrained, and they can be some of the hardest, is mailman, fireman, policeman. Instead of saying mail clerk, firefighter, police officer. It's getting more common, but I think it's still tough. The transgender and normal people, switching to cisgender, definitely a good plan. This cis simply means people who are comfortable in their assigned gender at birth, and it's a way to avoid normal. Okay. And then obviously please avoid hermaphrodite and transsexual. Both are considered offensive by most people and are highly outdated. Okay. We'll go ahead and close this. I'm sorry. There we go. And the gender unicorn we went over in the LGBTQ 101, so I'm going to go ahead and direct you to look at it there. Okay, key terms. So gender identity, the internal perception of one's gender and how they label themselves based on how much they align or don't align with what they understand their options for gender to be. Common identity labels include man, woman, genderqueer, trans, and more, often confused with biological sex or sex assigned at birth. Fairly self-explanatory. I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I'm only going to be going over the ones in blue, but if you're interested in these terms, please let me know, and I'd be happy to get you that information. Okay, intersex. Term for a combination of chromosomes, gonads, hormones, and internal sex organs and genitals that differ from the two expected patterns of male or female, formerly known as hermaphrodite or hermaphroditic, but these terms are now outdated and derogatory. Asexual, experiencing little or no sexual attraction to others and or lack of interest in sexual relationships behavior. Asexuality exists on a continuum from people who experience no sexual attraction or have any desire for sex to those who experience low levels of sexual attraction under specifics or only under specific conditions, and many of these different places on the continuum have their own identity labels. See demisexual, sometimes abbreviated ACE. Okay. Gender expression. The external display of one's gender through a combination of dress, demeanor, social behavior, and other factors generally made sense of on scales of masculinity and femininity, also referred to as gender presentation. Genderqueer. A gender identity label often used by people who do not identify with the binary of man or woman, an umbrella term for many gender non-conforming or non-binary identities, e.g. agender, bigender, gender fluid. Coming out, the process by which one accepts and or comes to identify one's own sexuality or gender identity, to come out to oneself. The process by which one shares one's sexuality or gender identity with others, to come out to friends, etc. This is an ongoing process, not a one-stop shop, meaning simply people come out in different ways, potentially over and over again, especially at the age of our youth. Heteronormativity, the assumption in individuals and or institutions that everyone is heterosexual and that heterosexuality is superior to all other sexualities, leads to invisibility and stigmatizing of other sexualities. When learning a woman is married, asking her what her husband's name is. Heteronormativity also leads us to assume that only masculine men and feminine women are straight. Cisgender. A person whose sex assigned at birth and gender identity align, e.g. someone who was assigned male at birth and identifies as a man. The word cisgender could also be shortened to just cis. A person who experiences sexual, romantic, physical, and or spiritual attraction for members of all gender identities expressions, often shortened to just pan. That's pansexual. As we mentioned earlier, things change. Identities are not static. Asking is okay. Policing is not, meaning you can ask questions, ask people's pronouns. You cannot say something like, I thought you were pan, or didn't you use they, them last week? Do not do that. Questions about these or other terms, please feel free to email me if you'd like, and we can get those questions answered. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about active listening. This is going to be the very basics. Give the speaker your undivided attention and acknowledge the message. Recognize that nonverbal communication also speaks loudly. Look at the speaker directly if you can. Put aside distracting thoughts. Don't mentally prepare rebuttal. If you're thinking about what you're going to say next, you're not really listening. Avoid being distracted by environmental factors, for example, side conversations. Listen to the speaker's body language, which is another way of saying that nonverbal communication speaks loudly. Use your body language and gestures to convey your attention. Nod occasionally, smile, and use other facial expressions. Note your posture and make sure it is open and inviting. So maybe like this, or like this, but not this or this. Encourage the speaker to continue with small verbal comments like yes and uh-huh. Our personal filters, assumptions, judgments, and beliefs can distort what we hear. As a listener, your role is to understand what is being said. This may require you to reflect what is being said and ask questions. Reflect what has been said by paraphrasing. What I'm hearing is, and sounds like you are saying, are great ways to reflect back. Ask questions to clarify certain points. What do you mean when you say, is this what you mean? Are both examples of how to do that. Summarize the speaker's comments periodically. Interrupting is a waste of time. It frustrates the speaker and limits full understanding of the message. Allow the speaker to finish each point before asking questions. Don't interrupt with counter-arguments. For some people, the sort of uh-huhs and yeahs can be interruptions. If that seems to be the case, check in with them and then maybe not do those affirmative voice, noises and words. Active listening is a model for respect and understanding. You are gaining information and perspective. You add nothing by attacking the speaker or otherwise putting him or her down. Be candid, open, and honest in your response. Assert your opinions respectfully. Treat the other person in the way that you think they would want to be treated. Okay, we're going to be going over scheduling and questions at a later date. Just be sure to fill out the form and participate in any of the other videos in this series, and we'll be getting to you soon. Once you've filled out your form, your information is in the system and we will be contacting you. Okay, here are some of our sources. You are certainly welcome to use them. And I believe that is it. If you want to contact me, you are welcome to do so. Let me go ahead and put my contact information up on the screen for you. If you have any questions or concerns, or if you haven't heard from us for a while after you've filled out the forms, please send us an email at info@harborinclude.com. Thank you.